The emergence of the Janata Vimukti Peramuna, that's People's Liberation Front, was not the result of individual ambition or a mere coincidence. People's Liberation Front arose in response to a specific social necessities. The formation of People's Liberation Front was shaped by a set of conditions with a range of political factors within Sri Lanka and across the global landscape. JVP, People's Liberation Front, played a critical role for the past 60 years in laying the groundwork from the inception with policies, organizational structure and the discipline of the party, which was strategically created and nurtured under these trying conditions. Today marks the 60th anniversary of Janata Vimukti Peramuna, that's People's Liberation Front. We have invited Professor Nirmal Ranjit Devasiri to engage in a conversation where the special contribution of individuals have contributed in building history. Very good morning to you, Professor.
Very good morning, Sabrina.
Just
a small clarification. I'm not the head of the department, it's just the professor of history.
Professor of history, certainly, sir. So what were the key events and motivations behind the founding of Janata Vimukti Peramuna, that's People's Liberation Front, and how has its ideology or influence evolved over time?
Well, this is a question that deserves a very long answer, but detailed answer. But I'll try to be as short as possible. I mean, for obvious reasons.
Certainly.
But I would like to focus on two aspects. One is that how the specific organization emerged, and so that's one aspect. Other aspect is that, as to why there's a large, the significant reception of this initiative by a very small group of, youth. And so as a matter of fact, we know that, they managed to mobilize hundreds of thousands of young individuals to launch island-wide, armed insurgency within the span of 5 years, which is not a trivial thing, right? So therefore, you have to ask as to why these young people, knowing that, their lives would be in danger, and, as to how they took part in this initiative. And so that's the thing that I would like to focus on.
Certainly.
First I will look at the background, and actually, when it comes to, we are talking about mid-1960s, 65, as a matter of fact, incidentally, there's the same year that I was born, which was, right? And, that's about nearly 2 decades after since the independence, right? So within this period of time, a lot of things have happened in Sri Lanka, right? So when you look at the basic figures, population has increased significantly. And also, not only the population increased, the expectations of the people, right? And because of mainly for two reasons. One is that free education, which opened up educational opportunities, particularly for rural, low class, economically underprivileged groups, right? So which gave them new kind of expectation in their life, in the future. Right, so that's the most important thing. And then there's another aspect, that is the broadening of democracy, right? So since 1931, Sri Lanka was experiencing the universal suffrage, and also there's a very high degree of political consciousness. The voting has become a kind of ritual for people, and where they identified that they are capable of changing government, right? So they felt empowered, politically very active, right? So what you see, and also the independence, gave a lot of hopes that, there will be a system that everyone will be benefited.
Certainly.
So that sense of, empowerment and so on. And also, the expansion of education and all kind of things, which I don't have, time to explain, but, these are facts,
as a whole,
known to everyone.
Correct.
And then, so this is the best side of the picture. But there's another side. Another side is that we have a very serious issue about our economy. While population was growing, expectations were growing, economy is not expanding, particularly the rural economy, right? So there's usually in these kind of instances, our society until recently largely a rural society.
Correct.
The urban sector is very small, and overwhelming majority of the people lived within the what we call as rural agrarian system. Most of them are smallholder farmers, right? And also since the lot of the expansion of medical services and all that, infant mortality rate went down. And so as a result of this, there were more children in their families, right? And then, particularly in the rural, the small, the peasant families, so they had a lot of children, and so then, but they don't have enough lands, particularly the next generation, and also, they lived in they engage in agriculture. They're using traditional, the modes of agriculture and so on. So there's a kind of serious chronic stagnation of the economy, and so then, this is what we call as crisis in the rural agriculture, the peasant agriculture. Right, so there has not been. There were attempts to, transform this situation, particularly in 1950s through, Paddy Land Act, so on. That they're not very successful stories, right? So that's the context, and so there were large number of young people, and actually they were not interested in, thinking about their future in these village circumstances. So they want to, get out of the villages. Right, but there are no lot of career opportunities like now, and now we have the large private sector and so on. The only, and also since for reasons that I mentioned, so there's no possibility of having a better career within rural agriculture. The lands are not properly available, even in agriculture. No, that's not for the people who, got a better education and, passed at least O level. And so they didn't want to be farmers. So that's the mindset, right? So they, at least they need government jobs, but which is not easily available. And so that's a kind of what we call as youth unrest. Right, so that's where the ground was set for this new mentality. Then you have the political side. So we have a very vibrant left political movement in Sri Lanka in 1930s, and so they were thinking about to make very long story shorter,
to summarize it.
So there's an idea that we need to overhaul the whole system, the idea of revolution. The revolutionary imagination is very much part of, as you said earlier, so this is very attractive political slogan, not only locally but also globally. So there are a lot of armed movement, right, topple the government, and and also you have the Soviet Union experience and so on. You have the Chinese Revolution, Cuban Revolution. These are very attractive to young, politically, sensitive young people. And so that's the context where, and also there were, problem about the left politics, left movement. And so they entered into the coalition with the SLFP, and many radical youth, not only youth but also some senior, the radical left-wing politicians thought that, the party leadership have betrayed the revolutionary ideals. And so there were a lot of the mushrooming of small, clandestine, and also some trade union-based, the movements, which propagated for a kind of more revolutionary, radical alternatives. So the JVP, or the precursor, it became JVP, later on, but, this small movement organized by Rohana Vijayavira came out of this new political context. Right? So that's a kind of, that's where you have to, look at for the origin of the party.
Right. How is the JVP's, that's the People's Liberation Front, logical stance perceived by different segments of the Sri Lankan population as of present?
Yeah. So there's a long history behind, the present, when it comes to, the now 60 years gone. And so they have evolved from a small, clandestine movement who, mainly propagated a kind of the revolutionary path based on a, capture of power through an armed struggle. Into a mainstream political party, and so they have, of course, they started contesting elections since 1977. So they contested, they ran some, 2 or 3 candidates. But in the 80s, so they took part in Development Council election in 1980, and also contested for the presidential election in 1982. And so then there was another armed insurgency led by the JVP. And after 1990, so there's a kind of new, new path. It's a new path because after the, end of the armed insurgency in 1989, at the end of the 1989, so there's a kind of new democratic opening in Sri Lanka. So there are a lot of people, campaign for media freedom, political, liberties, and so on. So that's led to the change of government in 1994. So this opened up a kind of new political context. So where JVP took part in very much part of this new mainstream political line. And there's one interesting thing. Within this new context, another important aspect to look at is that, there's a growing discontent among the people about the existing party system, right? So there are many, it has lasted many, times, and, and so there's to make a very long story short again, people began to realize that this traditional political parties, whatever have they done, they have ruined the country, right? So that's, while people kept voting for them due to the absence of any other alternative, there's a kind of discontent. So this discontent, the JVP could effectively mobilize this discontent. So at the end of 1990, so they came up with a very influential slogan called Unut ekai munut ekai medapara api javipeta. So we have traditionally 2 political camps, right? So they had a kind of system, it's called Tattumaru Krame, so the one party come to power and such to power, and so then, right? So this pattern lasted, and but people had their own issues, and so they have, in every system produce its discontent. And so then again, the people's expectations grew. There's a massive level of urbanization and, economic transformation and so on. And also our political elite also get, highly corrupted and, decadence of institutions and so on. What JVP managed to do very effectively and efficiently is that they could develop a kind of alternative discourse that address to this popular discontent, right? So therefore there's a growing support, and there were ups and downs, right? For example, in the first wave of rise of the JVP sort of came to an end in 2004 when they got 39 seats in the parliament after entering into an election coalition with the SLFP, where they formed the UPFA, United People's Freedom Alliance, right? So which ultimately brought Mahinda Rajapaksa into power. But after that, the Mahinda Rajapaksa was managed to absorb this emerge as a popular leader, and the JVP was a bit sidelined, and also the inner party split. A powerful group led by Vimal Weerawansa fled the party, or he was expelled, and so on. And again in 2011, there was another internal split where a more radical group left the party. Later, they formed this Frontline Socialist Party, which is now have formed an alliance called Jana Aragala Sandhane, People's Struggle Alliance, right? Led by Kumar Gunratnam, a member of 1987-89 insurgency. And but then, in my view, so then, that you have the replace of Somawans Amarasinghe by Andrew Kumar Dissanayake in 2014, which is a very interesting move, because, the Somawans Amarasinghe sort of belong to the old guard of the party. The Andrew Kumar Dissanayake, on the other hand, represented, the political line that emerged after 1990s. So there's a kind of although there were temporary setback, they didn't do well in electoral politics in 2019, 20, and so on, but they continue to be perceived by the people as a kind of group who are outside this corrupted political elite. So that's the main secret, particularly there's a new opening after 1922 mass uprising, so where the legitimacy of the traditional political groupings were questioned. And so then we know what happened, there's a kind of, all of a sudden, unexpected rise of the JVP. I think, again, in a nutshell, we can say that the JVP managed to capture the imagination of the people, particularly who were fed up with the traditionalists. That's how we say that, this 76 years curse, although it's maybe seen as a kind of simple formula, but, it's a very effective thing, right? So therefore there are a lot of expectation from the people, and rather than the JVP won the battle, JVP did I would say that the people sort of elected the JVP to perform. They gave them a mandate, right? So that's it is a very nationwide. That's for the first time So you got when you particularly look at the result of the parliamentary election, everywhere, in the north, in the east, and in the Colombo urban area, and until then, even mainstream political parties, with some rare exceptions like 1994 Chandrika Kumartunga's presidential election, a political party could not get the support from all the constituencies in the country. So we have which I would like to call a divided constituencies. For the first time, the JVP under the leadership of Anuradha Kumara Dissanayake managed to get the support of all these constituencies. So that is something need to be highlighted.
How does the JVP, that's the People's Liberation Front, plan to prioritize strategic implementations to create a clear vision for the future of Sri Lanka?
Well, Sabrina, I think that's a a question that I also don't have a proper answer, but I can give you some thoughts. So that is not a easy thing, right? So we are not living in an era where you can plan things and implement, right? As a matter of fact, JVP is a party that is ideologically based on the Marxist-Leninist teachings, right? So they have, when you look at this orthodox Marxist thinking, I would say Marxist-Leninist thinking, so there's a kind of formula, right? And then you capture political power either through an armed struggle or whatever means available, and you capture the state power and reorder the existing, social organization based on, some socialist, communist ideas. So that's a very simple formula. And so that's how, in countries like Soviet Union and China and so on, so they try to do it. And when you look at the Stalin's era, and in China during the time of Cultural Revolution and so on, and so they tried to completely reorder the existing society, right? But again, to make a very long story shorter, that era is gone. So now we are living in an extremely complex situation that we cannot reorder a society according to a particular ideological formula that we have. So we have to work with all kind of social agents who are powerful, who are very active, who express their views and so on. Right? So that's the thing. And then the bottom line is that the JVP is forced to negotiate a compromise their ideological standpoints with all kind of other players in the social political landscape, right? So that's a challenge, and that's one aspect. The other aspect is that other side of the picture, that we are living in an extremely challenging situation, particularly in Sri Lanka. So we have a massive debt issue. I don't think that anyone has a solution. There's no solution, right? To say the least, right? And in 3 years' time, so we have to start the paying our debts according to this IMF, mediated agreements and so on. And also, the other thing is that people's expectations are very high. So they have very high expectation from the government. ordinary people doesn't know, so they don't have idea about the the challenge that are massive, right? So they need the things and so on. So therefore, the challenges ahead is not very simple thing. But so that's where, so they have to and also so there's what they are thinking. They have some long-term project about the producing the it's called Nishpadana Arthike, the production economy. Unfortunately, what we were lacking, we had traditional, in the colonial times, a plantation-based economy and so on. But afterwards, so there has not been a revolutionary transformation in our economy. Even 1970, compared to our social expectations, the economy was not growing, not catching up. So that's a challenge, how to transform our economy. And also there's a massive demand for social infrastructure. Particularly there are three important things: education, health, and transport facilities. So these are very important. How important transport facilities is, because given this accidents and all kind of thing. And so these are you need a lot of investments which would not give you instant profit returns for these kind of services.
Even though the expectation is high.
Expectation is high. So these are the challenges. And, I don't have solution, but, what we would like to do is to highlight these challenges. So that's, we have to wait and see how the government is facing these challenges.
Certainly, of course, as you rightly worded, Professor, during challenging moments, the expectations of a normal citizen would be in abundance to experience everything coming their way very rapidly. So today marks the 60th anniversary of the Janata Vimukti Peramuna, that's the People's Liberation Front, and we did invite Professor Nirmal Ranjit Devasiri to engage in a very insightful conversation, and we sincerely wish to thank you, Professor, for bringing out the finer lines and the future perspectives in a very positive and in a reachable approach. We are engaging with a conversation now with Professor Liyanage Amarakirti. Political parties are fundamentally established to serve the nation, to represent the people's will, uphold democratic values, and contribute meaningfully to the country's progress. Today marks the 60th anniversary of Janata Vimukti Peramuna, that's People's Liberation Front. We have invited Professor Liyanage Amarakirti to engage in a conversation via telephone. Professor, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Professor, how do people in Sri Lanka view the JVP, that is the People's Liberation Front, today compared to its past image?
Well, that's a real good question, because, the People's Liberation Front, or the JVP, Janata Vimukti Peramuna, has created so much debate, discussion in Sri Lankan political scene. So therefore, there are all kinds of views from, all political persuasions, all political affiliations and ideological positions, all kinds of interpretations. But now, the party, after 60 years from its origin, the beginning, now it has created a president, government, and our state powers with them. And a few years ago, actually, people began to reassess, re-understand the legacy of JVP. That's, I think, after they came into the mainstream politics, roughly in early 1990s. About 5 years ago, when the JVP formed this broader political movement known as National People's Power. Many people who would otherwise would not join or would not look at sympathetically, look at JVP, joined the NPP, National People's Power. Now, what happened along with the establishment of this NPP, many people began this kind of a thought of the process of reassessing, re-understand JVP. Now I think nearly everyone is sure that they are in mainstream democratic politics. They are after, to change the situation in the country, in the economic front, social, cultural front. I think many people, obviously, the election result, presidential and the general election result, immensely demonstrate that people overwhelmingly believe that JVP can rebuild the country in all aspects of our society. That's what I think.
Certainly, Professor. And what sort of a perspective would you share when it comes to ethical leadership within political parties that would contribute to sustainable and inclusive national progress?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, actually. Now, so one of the political crises in our country was this so-called traditional political parties, mainly the parties who enjoyed the state power in post-colonial Sri Lanka, that is after the independence. They had to declare that country is bankrupt. Really, like they basically, economy and everything collapsed by 2022. Then 76 years of post-colonial history ended that way at the economic level. Therefore, one of the main slogans is that slogan actually shared by nearly everyone, that we need a new leadership that is not corrupt. That's basically the slogan against corruption was one of the ethical capital, one form of ethical capital that the current government, the NPP government has. I am not a member of the JVP, the party. As an academic and also literary writer, in terms of anti-corruption fight, the struggle against corruption, I have no hesitation in trusting the JVP leadership. From the beginning, once they introduced this card culture, full-time activism culture, they had this, immense sense of simplicity in their life. It is basically kind of political asceticism. They were like ascetics, like very simple way of living. They are like harder. The full-time political activities is marked by this great deal of simplicity and all nearly ascetic way of existence. So they have proven that they will continue that kind of simple life even with state power. I am kind of hesitant to believe in those who are in state power, but still with this political party and the way they behave 60 years before they gain the state power, I think they will continue to lead the nation with that simple way of life, which is fundamental and which is important to sustain corruption-less state administration. Because when you have state power, you have control over immense, economy. It doesn't matter, the country's economy could be small compared to other countries in the world, but still a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of power. When we have that party like JVP and PP controlling all those resources, we can trust that they will continue their simple way of being in the world, even with state power. And then your question about this inclusive, that's a really important one. We have to believe that we, in our country, the island nation, there are so many ethnicities, cultures, way of, existence, all kinds of, lifestyles. We need to have a state where everyone feels secure, no matter what their religion is, language is, ethnic background is. Everyone should feel that this is their home. This is rather idealist picture when you look back the history of our country in terms of all those. We are not very good at being truly inclusive. But then that's a kind of a dream that I like to, realize. I see, in reality, that the inclusive Sri Lankan society, truly inclusive, economic advantages or the economic benefits or the state power, everything should be shared. Everyone has a role to play. Everyone is included in everything that happens in the country. Meaningful inclusiveness. Let's hope that state power alone cannot guarantee that. We have a long way to go. But I am hopeful that the government will move ahead to create such a society.
In what ways, Professor, has the JVP, that's the People's Liberation Front, aligned the leadership to ensure that national development includes not just economic growth, but also the advancement of cultural and societal values?
Yeah, that's really important aspect of the kind of development that we envision as a nation, and the NPP also envisions. That is, producing something or selling something at the market is not human life. Economic benefits are also important. Increase in growth in GDP important, but the wealth, material wealth, is not enough for rich, rewarding life, right? Human beings are not machines producing something or selling something. Economic activity is important, but economic activity alone doesn't bring in the rich life that human beings need. Our life has to flourish in all kinds of ways. Especially, we need a meaningful leisure time, right? Meaningful retirement, right? Meaningful evening life. For example, what does it mean to have a meaningful evening or nightly life? Enjoyment of art, being able to watch a good movie, go to a theater, read a good book, and have meaningful discussions with friends and family members about meaningful arts. Those things are really rewarding. That's what human flourishing really means. For that, economic aspect is so important. Human beings have to cultivate their minds, consciousness, thought. The task of the responsibility of the state is to create a society, economy, and a background where human beings, everyone, really enrich themselves, cultivating their minds, consciousness, thought, thinking, taste, things like that.
Certainly worded rightly, Professor. And today marks the 60th anniversary of the Janata Vimukti Peramuna, that's People's Liberation Front. And we invited via telephone to connect with us for a very engaging conversation. And we were in conversation with Professor Liyanage Amarthakirti, where the JVP, that's the People's Liberation Front, was born out of the need to serve the nation, shaping policy, representing citizens, and driving the country towards development and justice. Thank you very much, Professor Liyanage Amarthakirti, for connecting with us through Radio Sri Lanka.